The legendary monsters Scylla and Charybdis, a true story? Myths are sources of oral historical narratives. Scylla and Charybdis were two terrible sea monsters, sailors who were in danger on their voyages from threatening waves and storms, created mythical figures in their imagination, which raged and tried to destroy them in a rage. Thus were born these two terrifying monsters. The sailors imagined that it was not just a strong wind and huge waves. They believed that something more was hidden behind all this, some creature evil in soul and terrible in appearance, who sought their doom, and this was what caused all the terrible turmoil, and the bad weather was not accidental. They said that Scylla and Charybdis were located opposite each other in a narrow sea passage that, according to Homer, who wrote the Iliad, the Odyssey, was called the Planctus Petris. This passage was completely impossible for anyone to cross due to the terrible situation that prevailed there due to the presence of the two monsters. Not even a flying bird was safe if it dared to cross there. There were many steep rocks there, very high, and a wave broke over them with terrible noise. This strait was placed in various places. Some said that it was in the area of the Bosporus, near Constantinople, today Istanbul. Others say it was Cape Tenaro. Others say it was the Canary Islands, outside the Mediterranean. That is, and most people believe that Scylla and Charybdis lived in the Strait of Messina between Italy and Sicily. The two monsters were located on two cliffs. One was so high that its top was lost in the sky and was always covered with thick black clouds. The clouds did not disperse even when the weather was good. The entire rock was very smooth, so much so that it looked as if someone had rubbed it to make it shine. It was a waste of effort for anyone to try to climb it, and in the middle of it there was a deep cave, so deep that not even an archer's arrow would reach its end, as Homer says. There lived the terrible Scylla. To the west, the cave opened towards the impenetrable darkness, Charybdis. When anyone approached, they could hear Scylla screaming continuously, emitting a cry that resembled the whimpers of a young lion. The Scylla was hidden up to her waist in the abyss of the cave. She had 12 deformed legs that rose into the air and 6 very long necks. Her 6 heads were horrible, with 3 jaws each. That is, each mouth had 3 rows of teeth and dripping poison. Her heads protruded from the cave, diving all around the rock and into the water. They grabbed the large whales of the sea, dolphins, dogfish, seals, and devoured them with fury, but they also ate people if a ship dared to cross the strait. Scylla grabbed as many rowers as her terrible mouths. Scylla's parents were, according to one tradition, Phorcys and Ceto, who had Pontus and Gea as her parents. Their children were also other sea monsters, such as Echidna, the Sirens, and Thusa, who symbolized the raging sea. We know the Sirens from, of course, Ulysses. Others, however, said that Scylla's parents were Forbes and Hecate, or Phorcys and Hecate. Hecate was the daughter of Zeus, but she was more associated with humans than with the gods. Her kingdom was the sea, and when she was not wandering around, she lived in her cave just like her daughter Scylla. Hecate was also called Lamia, and was a beautiful queen in Libya, favored by Zeus. Hera, in order to take revenge on her, transformed her into a terrible monster, and she later gave birth to Scylla. Finally, another tradition considers her parents to be Typhoeus and Echidna. Echidna, as we know, was half woman, half snake. Now, so her parents were Typhoeus and Echidna. Charybdis lived in the opposite side, and where there was a second reef, but of lesser height. On it had grown a wild fig tree, and under its foliage sat the monster, which vomited black water from its mouth. Charybdis could transform the narrow passage into a huge suction. 3 times a day it sucked the water, and 3 times it expelled it again with terrible speed. Thus, if anyone happened to be nearby when it sucked it in, they had no hope of escape. Not even Poseidon himself could intervene and help his protégés. Only a few heroes had managed to escape the dangerous monsters. Jason, with his ship, the Argo of the Argonauts, had crossed the passage successfully thanks to the personal care and supervision of the goddess Hera. The ship Argo, sailed through the waters, surrounded by Nereids who protected the ship, while Thetis herself was their navigator. Her husband Peleus was among the crew, the so-called Argonauts, and she constantly gave him instructions on what to do at each moment. It was said that Aeneas had preferred to avoid the strait and go around Sicily so as not to be exposed throughout through danger. And this advice then had been given to him by a Trojan gifted with divination skills, Helenus. He would later, however, see their terrible appearance when he passed through the gates of Hades. Hercules, fearless as always, did not hesitate for a moment to confront them when he found himself in the area. He was carrying Geryone's oxen, and the gluttonous Scylla snatched one from him. Then he rushed in full rage and tore her to pieces. Phorcys, her father, then ran to bring her back to life. He first burned the relic and then boiled it as she came back to life. This is why Scylla did not fear the goddess of the underworld, Persephone, since she had passed through death and finally escaped. According to another version, Phorcys had reattached the pieces of Scylla with burning torches. The resourceful Ulysses also had a pass between them. He had to pass between them when he left the island of Kirke behind him. She had taken care before his departure to give him instructions and advice to overcome the obstacles on his sea journey. Thus, Ulysses first passed the Sirens, then Scylla and Charybdis, and finally reached the island of the Sun, where Apollo's flocks grazed. And after escaping the Sirens, he had to face the two terrible monsters. Kirke, knowing that Charybdis is very dangerous, especially when it sucks in water, urged Ulysses to pass closer to Scylla, even if he risked losing 6 of his men, who would be snatched by the monster. This would be preferable to losing the entire ship in the terrible suction of Charybdis. Ulysses asked if he could fight Scylla himself, going out armed at the bow and defending his crew in this way. Kirke replied that he would receive nothing. She decided that it would be better for the hero to invoke at that time the name of Krataida, who according to tradition was Scylla's mother, so that the beast would be afraid. This would be the only solution, so that it would not have time to snatch 6 more men from the ship. When Ulysses reached the flat rocks, he had Kirke's instructions well in mind. His men panicked at the turmoil that prevailed before them, the incessant movement of the water, the terrible noise, the waves and the smoke. Charybdis sucked and vomited water in the sea, resembling a large cauldron boiling over a strong fire. Steam covered everything around. From the terrible sight, their oars fell from their hands. Ulysses tried to give them courage and called them to get as far away from Charybdis as they could. He did not reveal to them, however, that Kirke had told them about Scylla and the 6 lives that had to be sacrificed in order to save the rest of the crew. If he did that, everyone would be paralyzed with terror. Things would get out of control, and the ship would be lost for no reason. Ulysses himself finally decided to stand armed at the bow and not listen to Kirke's words, but he did nothing because in this turmoil he could not clearly see what was happening. All he managed to see was a terrible sight, 6 of his bravest men grabbed by the beast. He was holding them in the air, like a fisherman who pulls fish that have bitten the bait out of the water with his line. Ulysses heard their screams. They called his name and called for help. He saw them flailing their arms and legs desperately until they were lost, without him being able to do the slightest thing to save them. Fortunately, Ulysses' ship caught up and moved away from the dangerous passage in time without losing any other crew members. At some point, they reached the island of the Sun, as Kirke had already told them. The sorceress had also warned them that they should not, under any circumstances, touch the oxen that grazed there because they belonged to Apollo. If the god found out, his wrath would be great and their punishment terrible. However, Ulysses' companions, exhausted and hungry after so many adventures, could not stand it. Although they had not forgotten Circe's advice, they slaughtered and ate the god's animals. Apollo was soon informed and furious, took revenge on the culprits. He hit Ulysses' ship in the middle of the sea and killed all his companions for their disrespect. Only Ulysses remained alive, whom the sea pushed again towards Scylla and Charybdis. At that time, Charybdis was sucking the waters with terrible force. Just then, Ulysses managed to grab hold of a branch of the wild fig tree that hung from it for hours like a bat. He could not climb inside towards the trunk of the tree to support himself better, because he was holding onto the edge of a large branch, far from the roots. He could not even find anywhere to support his feet, and thus he remained suspended until Charybdis again sprang the water from her terrible mouth. Along with the water came out the remains of the broken ship. Ulysses then let go of his hands and jumped onto a plank. He was caught by it and traveling in this way, he reached the island of Calypso, or Gygia. The myth of Scylla and Charybdis was created by the imagination and stories of sailors who believed that the terrible weather phenomena were due to the existence of two horrible monsters. Over time, various stories emerged regarding their original origin and subsequent transformation. People, that is, as the years passed, tried to explain how they were born. They imagined that at first they were creatures of the land, and during their lives, for some reason, they transformed. Then they became permanent residents of the liquid element. Let's look at the various versions of the story of the two monsters. Scylla was originally a beautiful daughter of the sea, with whom Glaucus fell madly in love, but she did not reciprocate his love. Circe, who loved Glaucus, became jealous and wanted to take revenge on her. She poisoned the water where the daughter would bathe and transformed her into a horrible monster. Others believe that it was not Circe's jealousy, but that of Amphitrite, who destroyed her and transformed her by poisoning her bath with herbs. The reason was that Poseidon had fallen in love with the beautiful Scylla. Finally, a third version tells that Triton had also fallen in love with her as Poseidon's rival. To please her, he brought her shells and small kingfishers with their mother as a gift. However, the birds were so young that they had fluff instead of feathers, so when Scylla saw them, she was sad instead of happy, because she felt the bitterness of their mother, who was in tears. As soon as Triton realized that he would not be able to conquer the beautiful girl himself, he decided to turn her into a monster and had Circe use her magic. Since then, Scylla has personified the terror inspired by sharks and the dangers of the sea. Scylla was very often imagined in a second way. Apart from being a sea monster, they believed that she was also a sea goddess who had the form of a woman up to the waist, a dog to the hips, and a fish from there on. They imagined that she roamed the sea, sometimes accompanied by howling dogs. At other times she was depicted as winged, because they believed that she ruled not only the sea but also the air. As for Charybdis, they say that she was the daughter of Poseidon and Gaia. She was very gluttonous, so much so that she stole one of Hercules' oxen and ate it. He, disgusted by her gluttony, struck her with lightning and then threw her into the depths of the sea. Since then, she has become a sea monster, eating whatever she finds in front of her. This is from Ancient Mysteries. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support, and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.